Okay. David Gornoski, what's up, buddy?
It's great to be here, man. Happy New Year to you, and looking forward to talking to you today.
Well, happy New Year, man. Yeah, I listened to your Aaron McIntyre interview a couple of like what 2 weeks ago or something when I contacted you, and I think it was from a couple of months ago, but I had just gotten around to listening to it, and at the end, towards the end of the conversation, y'all started talking about history, and I was like, ooh, I want to talk to David about that because it sounded like you might have had a little bit of a difference of opinion with Aaron. Not to say Aaron's completely wrong, but he was talking about the cycles of history, and
Yeah,
you kind of gave him a little bit of pushback, and it made me think of something I heard Jonathan Pajot mention, which was that history is not only cyclical but it's also linear, which makes it a spiral. And
right.
it sounded like that's kind of what you were getting at. Am I
Yeah,
close?
yes, that's my view. I didn't know Peugeot had that view too, but that's good to know because it means we're headed to the same direction, maybe. Um, but yeah, history begins in the garden and it ends in the city, so things are going to move towards progress, right?
Hmm.
And Jesus talks about the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And he talks about he would do greater things than me. His first miracle is one in which the best wine comes at the end of the wedding party, and wedding parties are always associated with comedy and classical antiquity. And comedies always have a good ending. They don't end in a tragedy, right? So history is going somewhere, and it's going in the direction that Jesus is taking it as the king of history, as the greatest man who ever lived, at the very least, one could argue. And then, of course, as Christians, we'd say he's also the link between God and man. Um, and and yet, history is, thought by a lot of traditionalists to be a cyclical thing, nothing new under the sun style, like Solomon.
Right.
Solomon was wise for his time, but he's not as wise as Jesus. History's going somewhere. And so there's this kind of paradox in which it has a cyclical nature, it rhymes, but it also is actually headed somewhere. So I remember I was in a meeting with somebody trying to describe this to somebody, and I did the like a squiggly, like you're doing cursive, a
Right.
curly cube just keeps going up, and then it's not like a perfect line up. It's like sometimes the curly cube could be bigger and it could have a big dip and it kind of goes down, but the general trend is going up and up in the sense of more bringing heaven to earth, right? The unseen world being manifested into the seen world. And, a lot of people talk about theosis as a personal thing. And I think theosis needs to be thought of more as something for the world, for
Mm.
reality and history itself. Jesus creates history. So Christianity is what births the concept of history as a discipline in the first place, in a sense of being able to set aside your preferences and your biases for your own in group to objectively account for the bodies wherever they lie, including what your in group may have contributed to a conflict. Uh, so, therefore, Christianity births the concept of history itself as a discipline. Now, of course, it's very hard to set aside all of our biases, assumptions, presuppositions, and so forth. But the idea of history as a vocation, as a calling that one should aspire to practice, is a Christian discovery in our world. And then Christianity is also that which creates the concept of the future, that there's a future that is better than the past and that one can get there.
Yeah, and I think it was you that I had talked about this before because you mentioned that it starts in a garden and ends in a city, and I know that it's tradition within the Orthodox faith that that Christianity retake the creation from pagans. A story of this is whenever John and Mary John the theologian, the Saint John, and Mary were on their way to Greece, and they came to Mount Athos, and there were the pagan temples all over the mountain, and the pagan temples crumbled as the Theotokos approached Mount Athos, and that's how the monasteries ended up beginning on Mount Athos. And so it's that retaking, so that Cain being the creator of the city, and God taking back that creation from Cain and from that bloodline of Cain, fits right in to the ideas of orthodoxy. And so does reading like biblical text, whether if you start in the Old Testament, you read to the New Testament, you can read it in a spiral form. An example I would use of this is let's say the first time we meet Jesus in the Bible, he's in a food trough, and now every
Yeah,
Sunday we meet him in a chalice.
yeah, yeah. A little bit of an upgrade,
Right.
nicer restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that. The food trough to chalice concept is cool. I like that. Yeah, I mean, it's when you also look at like the way like legends. So you have like legends and those are more recent storytelling devices compared to like myths, which are more ancient. So like legends are kind of like a transitionary fossil to history, you know?
Mm.
And legends are like a mix between myth and like what we would consider like a modernistic telling of objective story and reality. So like the legends, there's a legend of in Switzerland in the Gothard area, area, which is where there's this massive tunnel that they created for EU distributions of goods. Um, it's the largest tunnel ever created. It was a big event. They announced it 2015, 2016, or
Yeah.
28. I can't remember exactly the year. I wrote about it, but the that area in Switzerland, there's a legend. Well, there's an old story about how. Uh, let's go back. So in mythology, it's human sacrifice. In a kind of fable legend, it's you have to have the devil demands a human sacrifice in order to pass through the mountains that he owns in that area.
Mm.
and and then the Christian legend that comes out later as the area in Switzerland becomes Christianized. The story goes that you know the devil was demanding a human sacrifice to pass those mountains, and the Christians trick him and they send a goat. So he says basically the first person the first one to come across this pass, surely he will die as a payment for you guys to be able to safely travel through this mountain pass. And and so the Christian invention in the legend is that they send over a goat and he gets tricked into taking the soul of a goat rather than the soul of a human. Um, and that god, it becomes looks like a goat god. It's like looks like Baphomet, right? So
Mm.
it's almost like that legend was a way for Christian sense making to come into the mythic space in which you would just offer a human sacrifice to an anthropomorphic animal deity or whatever, or a god that demands a tribute for the blessing of people's safety in the area to cross those mountains. And then the Christians like create a legend that is like a transitionary fossil moving towards reality, which is okay. Well, now that we're Christians, we don't do human sacrifice, but here's a methadone clinic for your heroin addiction to human sacrifice. We'll give it a goat, and that'll help you get off. It'll help you wean off of your need to have a human sacrifice as a part of your reality of who you guys are as a people, and your sense of needing safety and blessing. And so it'll be a goat, but eventually it becomes there is no goat needed because we become modern, which means we're even more Christian, and we realize you don't have to offer a goat or a human to pass through mountains necessarily. That
Mm,
God doesn't want human sacrifice. Those gods that demanded human sacrifice were in fact demons. And they were not gods. They were things that we made up ourselves in that sense. And then what happens from there, which is interesting, is that in the Gotthard Tunnel ceremony that happened recently, I wrote about this at fee.org, and LouRockwell.com published it, some other outlets, where I talked about the aesthetics of statism, because that Gotthard Tunnel ceremony, you can watch it. And this is what's so disturbing about the globalist government people, it's very occultic, the symbology and everything they do, the ceremony to celebrate the opening of this passageway that happens to be in that same area where those legends were told about the goat demon uh, being tricked by killing a goat instead of a human. But the so-called elitists of today, they want to return things kind of like back to the pagan world, because in the construction of this largest tunnel, which is doing, you said you're a driver, and that's people coming through with trucks driving goods all through the backbone of the EU.
mm.
There. But what's interesting is and disturbing is that I think it was 9 miners died in the making of that tunnel. Right, they died of accidents. Right,
Mm.
and in their tunnel ceremony opening, they depict 9 miners, and they show them dying, and then they show their souls making love to a demon, a Baphomet demon, who's mating with these souls. These are real people. So imagine you have a family member who was a miner there, who was a part of the construction of this pass, of this tunnel, and the people, the big shots who are celebrating this tunnel, are openly talking about and depicting your loved one's death as a tribute sacrifice that is to be mated and mounted by a goat demon, uh, as a form of payment and tribute for the blessing of this grand EU project. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So they're trying to roll back Christian uh, chasing away of superstition and mythology, and bring mythology back in an open celebration of human sacrifice. They're trying to roll back ethical progress we've made, and they're trying to celebrate it right in front of us. And yet we're so busy with distractions, we don't understand what they're doing,
Well, and we see this with the push of war too, right? That the sacrifice of the Ukrainians for for Western democracy is a positive. It's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, they do that all the time, right? And that's how war is a pagan enterprise, and Christians should be very skeptical of war, and they should be very against war, and they should stop making excuses for war and participations in it, because it's a pagan enterprise. And the early church got it right when they would make them, if you were a person who was a military soldier, they knew that was such a pagan enterprise in the Roman Empire that they made you, what, it was like a year, 2 year waiting period you had to wait before you were allowed to be baptized, because they wanted to make sure they got all that pagan sensibility out of you before you were brought into the church. I think that was a good idea because of how paganized, how pagan of a ritual war is,
Mm-hmm.
and it is rooted in sacrifice. It's like a collective trial by combat. In some tribes they would do trial by combat, where you have two candidates and they have to fight, and maybe one of them dies, and that's the sacrifice. And now it's like, you get these whole wars, and it's like millions of people potentially are sacrificing. And it's so sad that our country is run by people that have the same moral framework of Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars. He was so gleeful when he could get family members like Anakin Skywalker and Luke Skywalker, daddy and son, to be killing each other. He was so excited at the end of that movie, Return of the Jedi. He was just gleeful, smiling. He was so excited. He was getting off on all that familial fighting, right? And it's so sick that these wicked losers at the top of our governance, they just get off on seeing Ukrainian and Russian family members killing each other, and destroying each other. And it's like, no matter who you vote for, that's the Emperor Palpatine position of the folks running our government, and that's God has no place for that.
You talk a lot about utilizing technology from a Christian mindset to create the good. And
Yeah,
one of the things that I've recognized in as the spiral of history has continued is that as technology is introduced, it seems to have been utilized for evil first. So if you look at the knowledge of good and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right, being utilized
yeah,
for evil, and then you look at like um, Prometheus giving humans fire to destroy each other, and
yeah,
then you have the advent of the nuclear bomb. This
yeah,
spiral has continued throughout history. How do Christians and those of us who are against the evils of this world, the wars, the devastation, the destruction, the debauchery, utilize and get a foothold and take control of this technology that has always been presented to us firstly as an evil prior
yeah.
to it being used for good.
Well, it's not always used for evil first, but oftentimes it is, and it's because of a lack of faith in Jesus. People put their faith in princes. They put their faith in kings. They put their faith in governments, which is antithetical to putting their trust in Christ. And it's because of that that so much good, talented people get harnessed by governments apparatuses to create weapons of destruction rather than weapons of healing, or technologies for healing. There's the legend about Nikola Tesla's great stuff that he was trying to develop, right, to help humanity, and the government took all of his stuff. And I don't know if that's true or a legend or whatever, but it's like a
Mm.
part of it's a theme now. Like he took all of his stuff and they use it for their mafia wars. And um, the but like the tree of knowledge of good and evil, a lot of people believe that that was not intended to be never enjoyed, but that it was to be enjoyed in its proper time. So
Right.
they were impatient and they took a shortcut to heaven that led to hell on earth, and grabbing for something before they were ready for it. And that's kind of the impulse that we have. Oh, we know how to do a bomb. Let's go. We know how to. We think we know how to interact with atoms and split them apart. Well, let's use that to, you know, murder lots of people in Japan, civilians, rather than using it to create energy that would be pollution free and unlimited potentially. Um, but how do you break through that? I mean, it just means you have to have people who are willing to do those innovations outside of the world of oligarchic multinational corporations and government, and they have to be willing to lay down their life as a martyr potentially to get those technologies through the finish line so that the public can have access to it. And actually, if you think about it today, talking about the spiral of history, we're now at a point in which a so-called Tesla could bring radical breakthrough technologies that could liberate mankind using the power of social media, right, to get that information out like never before. Like
Hmm.
if the legend was correct that Tesla was trying to create, and if he was actually onto something that, and everybody has, they kind of blow these things up bigger than they are sometimes, but let's say a Tesla back in those days had a way to get energy that was off the grid and everything. If he was able able to live stream every day, like a video blog, his work in Colorado Springs. You know what I mean? And if he was able to live stream it to Twitter followers and YouTube followers, and other people were reacting to it and also documenting it and live streaming it, and all these different little redundancies, you could get that information to the public so that if you whacked him, if you killed him, other people could replicate it because they'd have enough of an idea to figure out how to do it themselves. And so, and no army can stop an idea whose time has come, right?
Right.
And for Hugo, so this idea that media technology can be harnessed to aid radical technology in the world of physical atoms is a really cool idea that Christians should think about. How to make sure that all these different nodes of disruptive forms of distribution of information could be used as a protection mechanism for folks who are willing to lay down their life in various ways, whether it's literally or whether it's being scandalized and called everything in the book and persecuted. And remember, when Christ says you will be persecuted, it doesn't mean you're going to be persecuted only by the globalists and the leftists. You may be persecuted by the Christians, because I got to tell you, my friend, every time I talk about these things to Christians, not every time, but there's always that a strong vocal voice that says, "Oh my goodness, the Antichrist is going to do that." It's like, what are you talking about? So you're going to get a lot of conservatives and traditionalist Christian types who are going to try to burn you at the stake, thinking that you're the Antichrist because you cured cancer, instead of reading their Bible straight and realizing that your job when you're redeemed in Christ is to serve your fellow human beings and to go hard in the paint for the glory of God on earth. You're not supposed to be a freaking loser sitting in a closet saying, "Oh my goodness, it's no hope, no hope, no hope." That's not the point of salvation. The point of salvation is to save the world. You know what I mean? I'm so tired of this defeatism, man. That's why it's a psyop that Christians have made themselves, Stupid. It's stupid as can be. It's not even the biblical thing. It's a sin to believe in that stuff. It is missing the mark. You're missing the mark of the Bible when you believe in anything good that's going to come is going to come from the globalists. Oh my goodness, don't take it. Hide, run. That's all they ever want to do. Run. And even the ones that want to do innovations, it's always like, we're going to hide in a little mountain pass. We're going to create our little utopia, like Galt's Gulch or something like that, like, some secret we're going to have little hoverboards, but only us and our little Christian trad sourdough bread making wives are going to be able to have hoverboards. Nobody else gets to have. It's like, what is this stupid stuff? That's not Christian. We're the universal religion, man. We're the ones that are with the new man. We're the new Adam. What are we supposed to do if you're the new Adam? Start with the word that sounds like Adam. Adam. Make something with atoms,
Yeah.
Get out there. We're made to be, participations in the image of God to create reflections of his beauty and glory through art and tool making. And tool making should not be something that we're afraid of. And just because a lot of dum-dums have used tools to use violent purposes, so what? You're going to sit there and let them keep doing it? Or are we going to get our heads out of the sand and start acting like Christians for once, Christians should be willing to die to bring cures for cancer. Christians should be, that's what we're called to do as martyrs. It's like we look back at the old martyrs and we're like, oh, that's what it means to be a martyr. Well, that's what it meant to be a martyr back in that particular time. Right. And it may come back. I mean, in North Korea, you get martyred in a similar fashion as the early church martyrs were martyred. Right.
Right.
I believe in Christ. Okay, kill you. But today's martyrdom is going to look differently from that. It's not going to be the same thing, and it's not going to be a universal, way. But my point is just that when that church movement, the way was starting, the way in which you got martyred or sacrificed by wicked people was simply by saying, hey, you don't need to like pray to that idol. God is not found in that idol. And Jesus is the Caesar. Jesus is the Son of Man, not Caesar. Stuff like that. That got you tortured and murdered. Today, we're in a different period. Because this goes back to the topic you asked me to talk about, history. Today we're in a different period in history. You know, it's
Mm.
2,000 years since then. What you will be martyred for now is bringing a cure that's so cheap for diabetes that you can scale up. You will be arrested. You will be indicted. You may be, accused of every kind of heinous crime. You might be 50 Me Too accusations because you cured diabetes without having an expensive pill that costs $10,000 to take, and therefore you need insurance. You might do something so disruptive that you're going to get persecuted and slandered. And Jesus said, blessed are those who are persecuted for my sake. And that might include Christians and trad people. They might take power, and then you're the Christian trying to solve diabetes, and they're going to say you're a leftist, globalist pig or something and put you in prison for that. You're still being persecuted for Christ's sake. So,
Mm.
especially if your heart is devoted to the service of your fellow human beings. So
Yeah.
we're in a different period in history. So the way in which we'll be martyred may not be the classical sense. It may be like you get martyred because you're doing anti-gravity, and the left calls you a misogynist, and the right calls you consorting with devils or something.
Yeah.
They did that to Jesus.
They
They
did.
called Jesus a tax resistor. They called him a sorcerer. It sounds like a conservative critique, doesn't it?
Well,
Most of his
that
critiques are from his right, I guess, so to speak. If that's kind of bad way to say it, but conservative reactionary critiques of him.
one of the things you made me think of when you were talking about being martyred for coming up with a cure for diabetes or cancer was Jesus being accused by the Pharisees whenever he healed on the Sabbath.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
exactly.
but
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
you and
That's
Father
real good.
Turbo had a really interesting exchange about the martyrdom and the 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 type of pain that could be coming your way if people were to act the way that you're enthusiastic about. And I really thought that was a really interesting exchange that y'all were having. And Father Turbo saying, you probably will be killed. I'm not telling you not to
Yeah.
do it, but you probably will be killed. Like I
Yeah.
would encourage you to do it. I'll even, you know, help guide you spiritually, but you're probably going to be killed. And I found that so interesting. And one of the things that kept popping into my head as y'all were having that exchange was it's the church's job to influence culture, not to be influenced by culture. And as long as the churches are continuously changed and influenced by culture and moving in this kind of progressive direction that so many churches are moving in, then you're going to have that as a real thing, because you will never have that strong community to back up those
All right. Yeah.
innovators.
Yeah. And as long as you have traditionalists and conservative Christians believing that Jesus is not saving the world and that anybody who claims that he is a globalist sellout, then you're never going to get anything done either. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So it's like they're so defeated they haven't read their Bible. They've been reading their newspaper more than their Bible, so they believe that because see, like that's where you got to understand history. If we're on a slight downward slump right now in our particular country, so it looks like a downward movement for the last 100 years or whatever in terms of societal cohesion and family unit or whatever. I'm not even saying that is true. I'm just saying if that's how it feels for people, um, that's you're not seeing the big picture. You're only seeing your little microcosm scale. You don't see that we're going to swing back up and we'll be in a bigger, better position in that spiral upwards
Mm.
than we were before. And I just don't believe that. Think about this for a second, right? Isn't it interesting, that everybody always talks about like traditionalist Christians and conservatives talk about like, oh yeah, and I'm not even saying that. No, Father Turbo is actually one of the more open-minded. He's got more of a nuanced take, which is why I had him on, right?
Mm.
He's going to
Yeah.
be more nuanced, like because he can have that dialogue with me. But a lot of folks who are more on the other side, on the extreme, which is more of the common traditionalist view on this, would be like, if you can't do that because they're going to kill you. And so here's what's interesting, right? It's like, So go ahead and eat your vitamin and take and say your prayers and do your communion and be a good holy Christian. Well, wait a second. Maybe that's the trick, right? You know what I mean? Because, yes, globalists, they didn't like, churches gathering during COVID and stuff, but hey, they're letting them do it now. So, you might be able to live a long, relatively happy and safe, quiet life, going to your church, doing your rituals, because you didn't decide to help your friend who's an engineer to make anti-gravity. So who's the one who's actually refusing to take up their cross in that scenario? Is it, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying everybody has to do that. I'm
Let me,
just saying that holiness can be a cover to not take up your cross. It can be an excuse. Does that make
right.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And, and this goes back to something you said earlier, which is that the Bible is a comedy, right? It's not a tragedy. It's a comedy. And
Yeah.
if you're
Yes.
so encompassed in reading the World Economic Forum website and all the plans of the globalist elites, what the ideas that you feed, that you entertain the most, are going to determine the way that you act within the world. And so if you're so engaged in that negativity and refuse to, and at the expense of the gospel and the scriptures that have been handed down to us, the gifts that have
Yeah.
been handed to us, then you are going to manifest those negative events within your life. But that doesn't mean that that's the right way to do it. Yeah, maybe you should know about the negativity that is going on in the world, but that is not where you're, not every ounce of your energy should be utilized to focus on that. And I did that for so long, just focusing on the globalists, focusing on how terrible the wars are, focusing on all this stuff, and letting that negativity
Right.
fester and build inside of me.
Right. No, you're right. It's where your mind focuses on. That's what you're gonna become more and more like. And that includes people that you don't like in your conscious mind. Unconsciously, if you're focused on them all the time, you'll become like them. You know,
Mm,
be careful who your enemies are. You'll become like them. That's a quote from Rene Girard.
mm,
You know, so if your enemies are those people, then you're going to take on their fear and their obsession with power or their obsession with control. You're just going to talk about how they have total control. You know
yeah,
that song by Oliver Anthony? They got total control, right?
yeah,
Isn't that how he said? So that total control, you're going to be so obsessed with how you don't have it that you become a loser because you're obsessed with how you have no control. And then you feel like the guy when you're having a meal with you feel like a guy who's got no control over your life. Yeah, it's
right.
horrible.
And you're full of resentment and bitterness. It leads to
Yeah,
depression, malaise, drug addiction, alcoholism. All these things stem off of what you're
yeah,
feeding yourself.
yeah. So my call to action is like the redemption of the blue collar mind, the blue collar man. Really,
Mm,
I'm calling for all little Teslas out there. Come on, let's go, and we'll bring everybody together, and we're gonna get into start tinkering around with ideas. Bring all and you're gonna have a lot of snake oil people. You're gonna have a lot of fraudsters, and you got to learn how to sift through those. But we need to have people who know how to make stuff to get out there and start. We need to have American Idol for anti-gravity engineers. We need to have an American Idol. I don't mean as a TV show, but I mean like a traveling talent recruitment drive. Like
mm,
find these people because you know where they're at. A lot of them are sitting there drinking beer and doing nothing with their life. You know what I mean? Because they feel like the elites have total control on some island somewhere. You know that whole thing. They sit there. They're dreamers, but they've lost their belief because they don't believe in the Bible. Even though they go to church, they take their communion. They're not acting like Christ. When you take communion, You should be more like Christ. You should be less like the elites have total control, and your dollar ain't nothing, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying? That if you're gonna whine about it all day, then you're gonna drink your tears away. Put your tears in your beer, and you're gonna sip it, and you're gonna do nothing. You're gonna switch from Bud Light when your boys tell you to switch back to Bud Light. You ain't doing nothing. Meanwhile, you got talent unlimited, but you never step out and get into your garage for energy devices. You know what I mean? It's like, and then you come up with a million excuses. They always say, "Oh, they're going to kill you if you do it." You know what? That's the same thing. The mindset of the slaves on the plantation. You know,
Yeah.
the slaves would say, "Hey, don't leave." That's what we're all saying. That's what we say. We say, "Oh, don't create anti-gravity technology, don't, because master's going to kill you if you do." Yeah. But isn't it interesting, Tommy, how like all the guys who could do the most to change our world are the ones that are stereotypically. You hear me?
Yeah, there you are.
I'm just saying, isn't that interesting that the guys that are most able to like really change the world for the better and liberate their fellow humans from these wicked tyrants uh, are the ones most likely stereotypically to be drowning themselves in alcohol and drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting how that works?
Yeah, it's been a constant struggle for me for years. So I can't sit there and say that I'm, excluded from that pain and that,
Yeah.
malaise, just being kind of like, all right, well, this is just that nihilism, just like, all right, whatever. It is what it
Yeah.
is. I don't know what
But
I'm
the
going to do about it.
but the guys most handy in the world of engineering are the ones we need, and they're the ones that typically stereotypically are most likely to be, numbing out,
Yeah.
right? And it's because they're dreamers. They're dreamers and they're doers. They know how to get things done, but they lack a vision, so they perish for lack of a vision, right?
Hmm.
So it's my job to give people a vision so that I can waken people up from their malaise. Lord knows I'm not equipped with the ability to start building an anti-gravity device, but I've been equipped with a voice and I can wake people up with that power. That's my job.
Yeah, and you do a great job. I enjoy a lot of all the subjects that you talk about. Um, you're it sometimes it's a little bit beyond me, but I'm like, oh, okay, let me listen to that one again because I'm not sure exactly where we were going with that. But
Yeah.
I do appreciate the fact that there's somebody out there doing what you're doing, and I think it's so important.
Yeah. It's beyond me too, brother.
So when you look at the kind of this kind of nihilistic mindset, and you're doing everything you can to wake people up with your messages and with your podcast and your writing, at where do you see the spiritual intersecting with the material, and how do you draw attention to that intersection in order to move people in the right direction?
Yeah. Well, that is an interesting question because I think a great way to look at that is what is your reason? Why do you think Jesus was healing people? That's a great way to answer that question is to ask the other question. Why was Jesus healing people a lot? A lot of Christians believe that most of the healing he was doing was just a metaphor. Like he did it, but it was like a symbolic metaphor to get them to wake up to their spiritual sickness, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a correct reading. I think that it's obvious if you look at it that he cares about the body as much as he cares about the soul. But a
Mm.
lot of Christianity is kind of Gnostic and stuff, and it kind of likes to put the body down as a kind of a lesser important part of the project of Christ. And I think that goes along with putting the earth and history as a lesser important project for Christ, right?
Ah, yeah.
And so, like, oh, so he's healing people only as like he's trying to break through to people's caveman sensibilities. So he's like, hey, Ooga Booga, come here. And he's like, you can't see? Okay, now you can see. So, hey, what about your spiritual side? How about that? Now, is the spiritual side important? Absolutely.
Mm.
But I don't think that it's all about like, I'm just healing you to get through to your dumb, thick skull that you need to be a nice person, right? I don't think that's what Jesus was healing people for. I think that the relationship between spiritual darkness and physical suffering they go hand in hand in a mysterious, complicated way, right? And so I think that a lot of afflictions happen because of spiritual darkness in terms of, you know, uh, people people suffering from malnutrition. Maybe that's what makes them blind. Why are they suffering from malnutrition? Because the elites that run their society are feeding them trash food. Whether that was in Jesus' time or in our time, that's reality. Now,
Mm.
that doesn't take away from the fact that you will have sometimes people have illnesses because they fell down the stairs. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they became deaf. I mean, they became blind and deaf because they hit their head too hard on the stairs. So there's sometimes that are just going to be freak problems. You know, that don't have any connection to wickedness in high places and principalities. Sometimes you just fell down the stairs. And sometimes but then when you look at the fall and the idea of the corruption of our cells, that's what causes them to go out of control and create things like cancer. But when you see Jesus walk on water, that's our way of taming nature, and that includes the out of control cellular division that is cancer. Learning how to tame that wild water and walk on that water that is cancer is something that God cares about, and He doesn't care about it just because it's a metaphor to get you to be spiritually clean. He cares about it for in and of its own sake because He loves this world and He loves the people that He made in it, and He loves everything about what He sees us, our potential, what we can become. And so when He's healing your eyes, it's not just a metaphor for your spiritual blindness. It's also because He really likes your eyes and He really likes you being able to see. And He thinks that's a wonderful thing that you get to enjoy that.
Yes, okay. I
Isn't that
really,
nice?
yeah, I love that. And I want to kind of focus in on a couple of things because you got my mind reeling, and what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me because it's something I've been thinking about.
He loves
So,
us. He's a loving father. Let's stop with this. Like, sorry to cut you off, but
no,
just
you're
think
fine.
about it. He loves us he's a loving father. Have we forgotten that?
Yeah.
You know, have we forgotten that and made him an algorithm of holiness points in the sky?
Mm.
What about the fact that He just loves that you can see? I mean, God, if you had a son that was blind and you could heal him, wouldn't you be delighted at loving of the colors? Or would
Hmm.
you just be like a freaking holiness algorithm in the sky that says, son, now you can see. Now, this allows you to see how wicked you were when you're mean to your sister. What? That's not how a loving father is, right? A loving father is happy that your son can see.
Right.
Why
Yeah.
did we forget that? Why do we forget that? At all denominations, I don't care what your denomination is. We have forgotten that. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, and if you look traditionally, like into the history of the way that it was read, the afflictions were entered into the world along with death after the fall. And so
Yeah,
if the afflictions entered along with death after the fall, the healing of the afflictions are just a foreshadowing of the defeating of death, which is actually overcoming the fall.
yeah, yeah,
And so that's I mean that's the hero's story, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the archetype of a hero.
Right. And that's Romans 5. Just as one man's death led to condemnation and suffering for all men, so too one man's justification leads to justification and life for all men. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But this idea that Christ is the new Adam, and so he's going to redeem everything. He loves who you are. He loves that you like to sing, or he loves that you like, and I'm so, it's just, he doesn't, and then we talk about, well, why does God give us a voice to sing? So that he can hear his name praised.
Yeah.
Well, not really. I mean, that's part of it, but we want to fashion God in our own image, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we think about, if I was the king, I would love it when I walk out, the crowd cheers my name, Well,
Mm-hmm.
God allows us to have these dumber views of him so that we can at least get somewhat directionally in the right direction of following his beautiful way, right? But
Right.
in reality, God's view is way more mature than us. And he does not make us have vocal cords just so that we can chant his name, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. We do that every day in different ways at worship services and liturgy, but and that's okay, and it's beautiful, and God appreciates that. Yes, he sees us as little creatures, but he doesn't, he doesn't really need to hear his name chanted to feel good about himself. Okay, that's what we need. he,
Yeah.
he actually created your vocal cords because he loves the way your vocal cords work, and he loves the way you sound. He loves your voice. He loves how you sing. He loves you for who you are. But we don't like that God. You understand what I mean? We don't like that kind of God. We like a God who's got conditions to his love, because that's the kind of human that we tend to respect in real life. Hard
Mm-hmm.
to get humans, right? So we always say, well, God gave us a voice so that we can sing his name. Well, guess what? You can sing his name and not sing his name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Singing his name means to sing beautifully at the best that you can about a whole host of things, about romance. That's honoring God, right? If
Yeah.
you do it in a beautiful way, singing about romance, singing about the stars, singing about pain, those are all forms of honoring God because you're made in his image. And he loves that for its own sake. And I think that's an unsettling thought for a lot of conservative type Christians. I keep picking on them because those are my audience, it's
Well,
like
well, there are
they're not really.
people.
I don't know who my audience is. I don't want to typecast anybody. I'm just dealing with what I tend to hear.
Right. When you look at, okay, so do you, there's a lot of concern that entering into these types of contracts put you in a situation where you have to contractually bond yourself to terrible people, right? You have to contractually bond yourself to the Klaus Schwabs of the world. How does one go about entering into this world on a large scale the way that you promote it, and avoid the trappings of entering into that world? Or
What
is there, well, I was going to say, is there a way that these things can be organized and created on local levels and grow organically from the local level up?
It can do all the above. We can do it national. We can do it local. We can do all of it. It
Mm,
just needs to be done in imitation of Christ, And so, you know, Christ wants to save Klaus Schwab, right?
right.
Klaus Schwab was made by God.
Mm,
Klaus Schwab, God loves Klaus Schwab. Imagine when Klaus Schwab was a little 3-year-old, the way he would run around with his brothers and sisters, the way he would pick uh, little peaches off. God loves Klaus Schwab more than you can possibly imagine. He wants Klaus Schwab to repent of, so he wants to work with him, come to
mm,
God, right? And And then there needs to be people who can help the little old lady who's a librarian at a library in a town of 500 people. God cares about that librarian's life just as much as Klaus Schwab, and there needs to be somebody that helps her too, right? You see what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So there's a host of things that we can do, and every one of us has a role to play.
Right.
Unfortunately, we tend to have the mindset that, it's either got to be big or it's not successful. That's wrong. But at the same time, I don't like the other extreme where it's like, if it's big, it's evil. You know what I mean? It's like, come on now. I mean, both of those errors are a problem.
Okay.
So, there's, you know, people like Tucker Carlson can be used to be instruments of great change at a big scale.
Mhm.
Um, Someone with that kind of a platform, he should be using his platform, and he seems to be doing great, ideas, and he seems to be on a journey that is interesting to see where it's going to head. Um, and so we need that, but we also need, we need to make sure that uh, every, facet of our society is saturated with that unconditional, self-giving agape love. That is the spirit that will change the world. And there's no one formula for how that happens. Every one of us has a different calling, and I think that means that there's a whole host of different ways that we can achieve our calling. And we need to think boldly and joyfully. First of all, let's get the smiles on our faces. And I know sometimes it's hard to smile, but sometimes it's just good to practice smiling and get that smile right and really feel that smile and let that smile permeate your whole body and resonate with your whole spirit, and becoming in tune with your body like that, to just have joy, practicing joy every day. Whatever it is that gives you joy, practice that every day until it becomes more of a habit. Joy is just a default habit of mine. That's a great place to be. And that means you got to learn how to get people who are negative, to not be around those people if they don't want to, practice joy with you. You got to separate a little bit sometimes. But that doesn't mean you should be judgmental, because, we all need to look in the mirror. But, practicing joy is the first step. I don't see any conservatives really practicing a lot of joy in the public square. They're always reacting with outrage about the Jeffrey Epstein list and stuff like that. Where's the joy, and not stupid, corny joy. That's not really joy, like corniness and stuff like that. It's dumb, and cheesiness is silly, to be like fake, but just like truly having joy and realizing that the world is alive with potential, and that our job we're to be explorers, we're to be discoverers. And I keep hitting the greatest hits that I'm interested in, but there's a lot of stuff that I just don't even think about. I talk about the greatest hits. You know
Mm.
what the greatest hits are? They're things that I don't want to deal with in my life. I'm tired of gas being so high. So I want to have energy too cheap to meter, because I'm tired of paying so much at the gas pump, and I'm tired of having, electric bill too high and all that.
Hmm.
I'm tired of food being too high. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I take the things that are like low hanging fruit in my mind. You know what? You know why I want anti-gravity technology? Because I'm tired of paying gas pump. I'm tired of wars for oil, and I'm tired of like having planned obsolescence. It's part of my car every time there's a problem that I have to fix, and it costs a ton of money. And my mechanic tells me about how much he hates doing this job, because every part is so ridiculously made, and planned obsolescence is built into the parts, and it's just such ridiculousness. And I'm like, I just want to simplify this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to simplify this and make it glorious for God, because I know that, even though Isaac Newton said that gravity is a one-way street, I know that my eyes and my mind are made by God, and I don't see it being a one-way street. I think gravity is just magnetism, and there's magnetic force, attraction, and repulsion. And so, like, I'm using my God-given mind to say, okay, then why don't we just have repulsion of the gravity field of Earth, so that we float around, instead of having to have all these combustion engines to move around and all the expensive parts that require to maintain them and all the little gimmick guys in between that figure out how to make them obsolescent all the time and always needing to get new parts that cost an arm and a leg. And some guy that doesn't want to do it has to do it. And then you don't feel like, it's just all that whole stuff is just part of the fall and it needs to go away in the name of Christ. Right. So you just got to do it, and nobody can do it all, but I want to make a holy hell mess of it. I
Yeah.
want to use my life to advance cures for cancer and cures for diabetes and cures for wars for oil and cures for obesity and cures for raping the earth with mining. I want elemental transmutation because that's another touch point that the elites use to get us to hate each other. Is we got to go to war because China's got some rare earth that we need, or North Korea's got 7 trillion in rare earth. Why don't we just create rare earth elements at room temperature using elemental transmutation? And that's stuff that you can research and learn about and think about how to do it and not be scared. And if you're scared because you're going to get hurt, then, get the proper training so that you do it so you don't get hurt. If you want to become an engineer in that field, we need that. We need chemical engineers. We need material science. We need people who are not obsessed with textbook specialist knowledge. We need more Renaissance men, people who are willing to integrate different fields of knowledge in very creative new ways, but we need people who are good speakers to speak the truth, right? We need people who are podcasters to tell the truth and to be responsible for the audiences that they have, to not give them despair porn. And is that going to get your video flag? You can take it out. If so.
Probably not. I don't post on YouTube anymore.
Oh, okay.
They don't allow me to, so I just don't even try.
Yeah. Well, it's like that despair porn is very popular with conservative and Christian and those kind of programs. It's like, well, if you have a show, make it your duty to find how to bring confidence in your audience. If people are listening to you, it's because they want to know what to do. They want to know how to think. They want to feel a certain vibe or something. So be responsible with the vibe that you're giving off, because if you have an audience of, say, 100 people a show, imagine if you were invited to speak in front of 100 people in your community every week. You should be very mature about your responsibility to them when they're listening to you for hours a week or whatever it is. And you got 100 people. You should be very mature and wise with their listening to you. You should equip them with things to improve their life, whether it's attitudinal change or a spiritual affliction they need to get over, or maybe they are, working in a seed oil factory and they were like, this is a great job, but it makes a lot of money, but I don't want to keep making a living pumping poison into people's bodies. Maybe I need to get a job in another field that doesn't use seed oils for human consumption. You want to inspire people to get up out of the couch, get up out of the boat and walk on water, and be very conscientious about the vibe that you create, because it's very easy to attract a crowd when you're selling them despair and anger. Okay. Let me tell you, I would be a much more, popular, successful on the metrics of numbers host if I had sold despair and anger. Okay. Despair, anger, detachment, those are popular vibes that make you a lot of money right now, because a lot of people, they want to watch mimetic models that reflect despair and confirm their need to have despair, or they want to watch models that reflect cool detachment, like I'm just above it all, I just above it all. It's nothing bothered. It's all, it's kind of that's kind of like nihilism a little bit, but like detachment, like, there's just, we're just above it all. Yeah. And then you got the ones that mimetically use their program to sow anger, and those emotions are very hot right now. And it's like you can make money selling detachment. You can make money selling anger as a vibe that you give off, or you can make money selling despair and fear. It's hard to make money saying, hey, you can create anti-gravity, because what does that do to the audience if they feel intimidated by a message of hope and action,
Mm.
right? Because it's like it's not entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can try to make it entertaining by, being funny or whatever, but when you try to say like, hey, go cure cancer, they immediately feel like that's too big for me, I don't know. So they feel like it's like pouring cold water, right?
Mm.
Pouring cold water on their life, right? Because they've been told you're not good enough to cure cancer because you don't have an oncology degree.
Right.
So you're pouring cold water. You're waking them up to reality. You're pulling them out of the matrix. If you sell them fear, you're keeping them in the matrix because they're afraid all the time. The matrix wants them afraid, and you're just the reactionary or Christian version of that fear feeling, right? So you're keeping them in the matrix. When you sell them despair, same thing. You sell them anger, same thing. They're mad at somebody, and you're telling them to be mad at somebody else. You know, uh, but it's hard to get people to feel like motivated to do great things, to love someone, right? That's hard to unconditionally love somebody. A lot of people get into the business of curing or cancer research because of prestige, or the prestige of being a scientist and stuff like that. How many people get in there as a vocation to truly want to solve the problem and find the most inexpensive, non-toxic modality to do it with? That should be everybody. That should be the first day in class.
Yeah.
But the nature of human beings is, like Thomas Kuhn said, most people that come into a scientific field of knowledge, they're not looking. They don't get them to say, "Hey, kids, let's pick apart relativity and Einstein. Let's see if it's actually true or not. Let's really run all the hardest arguments against it." And no, they say this is settled. Move on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have that, that's not a Christian mindset. That's a mimetic mindset. That's a negative mimetic mindset because it's negative in its outcome. It's not pushing people forward with boldness. Like
Yeah.
I put on Dr. Michael P. Lasanti, and he's the one using doxycycline and azithromycin, which are common generic antibiotics to kill cancer stem cells. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and these are generic drugs, FDA approved. Nobody has them on. Imagine if Tucker Carlson had them on. Imagine if Candace Owens had him on. He's got 39,000 citations on Google Scholar alone. I mean, not Google Scholar. He's got 39,000 citations on Google Scholar.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want credentialism, you know, he's got that for you if you want
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And he's using antibiotics to kill cancer in breast cancer patients and all kinds of stuff. He's got another one. He's always working on stuff. But why is that not the top story on Fox News?
Right.
Why is it always Epstein and all that stuff about, that's important that comes out, but that should be the side story. The main story is what humans can do.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody who gets into cancer research is told to stay in the paradigm of immunotherapy and all these really expensive drugs that require patents to make them, have their research funding paid back. And then they require these massive patents to make a big profit margin that's, only there because of the patent. So the whole paradigm of medicine is patently absurd. It's all based on patents. It's not based on, like, if you're a Christian going into oncology, you should be like, okay, Christ compels me to really challenge anything in the textbook. Not that because it's in the textbook, it must be wrong, but just that because humans are mimetic, most likely things that are told to be untouchable in the textbook could be wrong, right? That could be is the starting point of a Christian oncologist's mind if they're actually imitating Christ in their vocation. That's why we need to have every thought captive. Every thought we have is captive. When you go to church and take the Eucharist, it should help you figure out how to think like Michael Lasanti to use antibiotics to cure cancer. You know,
Yeah.
And I like talking about the big topics, but this is for everything. Psoriasis. People are doing things like that in psoriasis. Removing seed oils helps with things like that. You know, um, uh, People are finding dietary interventions to cure a lot of problems for people.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, Lasanti. If we had a sane society, it wasn't run by psychopaths. Lasanti's work would be top story all the time, and there'd be 100 other people replicating Lasanti's work, and billionaires like Elon Musk and others can put their money together and say, you know what, it's going to cost us pennies. We're going to go ahead and do the FDA research to prove that these cancer stem cells can be remediated by the use of this antibiotic
Mm-hmm.
that's generic, that's already approved. That's because once it's approved by the FDA for one thing, it's already cleared the safety measures, and then you have to prove. You have to do their double-blind studies and all that to show that it's efficacious for the next illness, in this case, cancer. So
Right.
there should be billionaires putting money together to do this. Like the people who say they care, you don't even need a billionaire. We could crowdsource it and give enough money to do FDA research to go through the wicked king standards of getting it approved by the king's own methods, so that humans could have access to a very cheap, inexpensive, and highly effective way to stop cancer metastasis. How many people have suffered because of that? And think about mental health issues. How many people have like childhood traumas because their parent or someone had bipolar or schizophrenia or some kind of antisocial thing. And
Mm.
they've shown that when they give prisoners increased omega-6 in their diet, it makes them more antisocial and violent. You know what I mean? So how many people had childhood traumas based on stupidity of eating seed oils and other inflammatory foods that was contributing greatly to people being more hateful than they could have been. They could have controlled it a little bit better if their mind wasn't warped by these toxic chemicals that are causing people to have uh, mental health issues. You don't think if you think I'm out of it, go listen to Dr. Chris Palmer, credentialist, Mr. Credentialist, listening to me talk right now. Go look at Dr. Chris Palmer from Harvard. Or is he Harvard or Yale? Someone fact check me on that. I think he's Yale. No, he's Harvard. Go with your first gut instinct. He's Harvard. Yeah, I think it's Harvard. Yeah, he's Harvard. Dr. Chris Palmer, psychiatrist at Harvard, who does clinical work, putting people on ketogenic diets, removing seed oils. He can put schizophrenia in remediation. So how many people maybe suffered from a bipolar family member doing hard times with them that could have been remediated with dietary information? So Christians, when you go to church, it should be a huddle session with your priests and your leadership. They get you communion. They get you they lead the worship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, it should be a huddle session. Okay, Bill, you're a home builder. How can we glorify home building and get those prices down so people can afford it with quality materials? What are you finding? Bill says, I don't know how to use a computer. You say, hey, Ted, you're a young guy. You're really good with computers. Go find out all the latest technologies Bill can use in his home building to make houses cheaper, make them
Mm.
more beautiful, make them more glorious to look at, whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
It should be like a huddle session for redemption and beauty. You should go to hey, Sally, how's it going over there? Yes, my deli's doing well. Hey, Sally, did you get rid of that soybean oil in all your chicken salad yet? I'm working on it. I got a new type of, we're gonna be emulsifying olive oil. We're gonna use olive oil based mayonnaise now. Thank God that one deli can give you good chicken salad and tuna salad without giving you crap.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Then you go to the next guy. What are you doing, kid? I'm cutting grass. Good. You remember not to use that Roundup on people because that's giving people tumors. Thanks. You can use this instead. You know what I mean? You go to the next person. How do we glorify the human race? See what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You go to that painter, say, man, you're painting beautiful paint. How can we help you get better paint? You know what I'm saying? How can we showcase your art at the exhibit?
one of the things I'm hearing what you're saying is it's it's leading slaves out of slavery into the wilderness, like Moses did,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And remember, they went out into the wilderness, and it wasn't long before they were like, "Man, we had it better in Egypt. We had it better
yeah,
as slaves." And today, we're not necessarily physical slaves, but we're slaves to our passions. We're slaves to the materialistic world around us, and people don't want to give that up. They don't want
right.
to they don't want to take the chance of losing what they have because they step out and because they do something. I mean, we watched we've watched since COVID the people being debanked and having funds pulled. Alex Jones is one of them. Donald Trump had money frozen, assets frozen. The Canadian truckers had a lot of their assets frozen. We had people that were at January 6th. The FBI was asking Bank of America to go through and find out everybody who spent money in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. So people are
Yeah,
terrified. And it's this, they've they've so successfully locked us up into tribes of being against things that it's
yeah,
so difficult for people to switch that mindset like what you're talking about and being for things. And so it is definitely going to be a struggle, but it is a struggle worth doing. And like you were just saying, starting in the church, in the community of the church, is
yeah.
probably the easiest and best place to begin working out these problems.
Yeah, and don't wait for your pastor or priest to do it for you,
Right.
because you might need, because his job is not to do all those things. He should, I mean, in theory, but it's not really the expectation. The
Mm,
expectation, if he's doing his job, is to make, just like Jesus said, you will do greater things than me, then your pastor or priest, being a symbol of Christ, should make all of his flock want to do greater things than him,
right.
right? And that same vocation, right? So that's kind of like how that's supposed to work. But we just want, we want the easy route, and we want the, like you said, I like that we are more excited about being against things.
Mhm.
That's so true. We want to be against things rather than for things. And that's why it's so easy when I talk about anti-gravity for people to say, well, the Antichrist is going to give it to you. Well, uh I mean, yeah, that's
Not if I do it first.
exactly. And not if churches do it first. Why aren't churches doing this? Why aren't churches having a lab for little Teslas? When I
Yeah.
call it little Teslas, I mean little young people right now.
Right. Right.
They're 17, 18, 8, 16, 15, whatever, man. Like, there's some geniuses out there. Get them inspired. Don't stop letting them play Minecraft all the time. Put that Minecraft brain to a freaking science experiment, and do it at
Mhm.
your church. Have it, have it crowdfunded by all those ties and donations, and I'll think about all the money they raise for Republican politics. Imagine if that money went to funding these types of stuff to make housing more affordable. So you say, we don't need government or big corporations. We figured out how to make housing more affordable. And then you have politicians that are Christ sanctified, and they're over there reforming some of these codes and zoning laws to be more freedom oriented, so that people can afford to build homes. Because, see, they always use the guise of, because Christ beat Satan, he always, the evil always has to use the concern for victims as the occasion to do corruption. So, like, zoning laws and building codes and stuff that governments mandate oftentimes have a good intention or something attached to it, like, well, we're protecting you from a dangerous building. But what that is actually, the cover story, the reality is to protect a guild that's fat cat oriented from having disruptive people be able to build their own homes, right?
Right.
Got to do permits and all this stuff. It's all about protecting guilds and special interests. Just like cars, why do cars have to be $30,000 for a new car? A new car, we've had a car invented for so long. Cars, if Christians were allowed to have free, if Christians were bold enough in taking freedom and whether they're a politician, they're repealing corrupt cronyism and corrupt regulations that are rigged, or whether they're engineers and they're figuring out how to make things better and not planned obsolescence, we could have cars cost brand new $5,000.
Mm.
You know, $8,000 brand new, you get you a nice, safe car. But then you don't need the banks, so the banks don't like that. The banks have investment in, these groups like BlackRock. They have a stake in all these different things. They have a stake in the car, they have a stake in the builder, they have a stake in the bank or whatever. So, but you can't complain about it. You just got to be a man about it and get up and do something. I mean, I can't. The reason why I keep saying these vague things and then I go to these greatest hit applications is those are my particular interests, but I don't know what other people do.
Mm.
I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what their interests are. I know that housing needs to be more. I'm looking at the touch points. What are the touch points that trigger divorce? We don't want children to be in divorced homes, right?
Right.
So we got to remove the touch points, housing debt, car debt, we
Mm-hmm.
need to get people to stop using debt in general, but it's like all hands on deck. We need something teaching people not be in debt. At the same time, we need people building homes that don't require that much debt or debt at all to afford. You
Mm-hmm.
know, see how that works? That's how Christians should be thinking every day of their life, the rest of your life, every day. That's all you do is things like that.
Mm.
You know, and it's like a lot of these things that we have, like drug addiction, is because people have despair. So when what I'm talking about, if people were to be more excited about the world, a lot of that drug addiction stuff would solve itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People numb out when they feel like there's nothing to do. If you got something to do that's exciting and wonderful, you're in thrill. It's a thrill. You know, there's nothing more thrilling than creating, whether that's art or whatever.
Mm.
So, that's and then you have, like how many people are on fentanyl because they got introduced to opiates from the medical system, from the
Right.
hospital. So making new hospitals, alternatives to hospitals, all these things, that should be a conversation that we're having in our churches. You talked about the January 6th thing. That has been used as an occasion to scapegoat and vilify and demonize. But you know what? How many of those people at January 6th go to church? What would the percentage be? What do you think is the percentage?
Uh, Probably about 60.
Yeah. So
I,
if 60% of those people go to church, they should have had at least 60% of those people say, don't do any violence, because their pastor should have been telling them the crowd is a lie, like Soren Kierkegaard says,
yeah. Yeah.
because that's what Christians know. Christians, you should have pastors who are saying, look, guys, I want to tell you something. I hear a few of you guys are interested in going to that January 6th thing. Let me tell you, let's talk about mimetic scapegoating. Let's talk about what crowds can get riled up to do. Let's talk about the reality of DC. We want to be able to honor those in government and respect people, but at the same time, we have to be honest and we have to tell the truth.
Mm.
And the truth is, DC is the greatest architect of regime change, coup, chaos around the world. This is what they do. Some people have a burger shop. They make the finest burger. DC makes the finest coups around the world. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going to try to get a little crowd up around them, they're going to ninja flip that. I've said that to my radio audience. I'm not a pastor. Every pastor should have been saying that to their congregation. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean,
You don't walk into that. Yeah.
well, I mean, it's just, you just know how things go. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, you don't behave in ways like that, even, even as I mean, at least in my family, we were raised to know better than to engage with
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And Trump should have known better. He should have had a better pastor. He should have had the conscience to know that, he should have had a plan. He's like a child.
Mm.
I have to say, I don't care what people say, man. I mean, he's like to whip up people into that kind of outrage, and maybe that the outrage was justified or not, I don't know, but to whip them up and send them in front of city where their most famous invention in the last 100 years is how to successfully overthrow governments around the world.
Right.
You're asking for them to ninja flip that on that movement.
Yeah.
They're gonna Aikido flip that right on their tails, and that's exactly what they did. The only saving grace was they're rather incompetent and they didn't clean up all their trails,
Right.
But they're not that incompetent because to this day, you know, half the country still believes those people were literally trying to overtake the government, you know?
Yeah.
Like I always say, and see, I'll practice what I preach here. I'm not just criticizing it. I've always said that instead of doing that mass rally on January 6th, Trump should have laid in the street with a silent protest, prostrate, face on the ground, face on the road, in the middle of the road. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
It's silent protest. You could have his guys and stuff, a Secret Service or whatever, like block off a part of the road, and he could just lay there with his suit, with his red tie on the side, and protest like a prostrate, like something weird like that, and people would be like, "What the heck? This guy is the loudest mouth we've ever known in politics, and he's silent, and he's speaking non-violent language. He's speaking non-resistance." And
Mm.
that would have shook the foundations of DC. Boy, you better believe it. That would have shook the whole world if he had done that, man. That would have shook the world for generations because nonviolence is more beautiful and more powerful because it's from Christ. Violence and crowds are from humans, and that's why they're dumb and they don't work. See what I mean?
Right.
So
No,
it's
you're
like,
absolutely right.
so that one move could have made our situation in our America so much better. So do you see what I mean when you talk about local things you do versus national things? That
Hmm.
one national choice, if he had someone like me in his ear saying, "Hey, instead of all this stupid stuff they're doing, let's just do this," and he's going to be like, "No, I'm not going to get on the ground. What are you doing? That's weak. That's weak." And then I'd have to sell him and explain to him how that's powerful. Nonviolence is powerful because Christ is king, not you, buddy. You didn't
Hmm.
set the rules, bro. You can talk about how much you like generals, but they don't mean nothing. Look at what Christ does. And this is your chance to redeem this moment and if he, I mean, even from a cynical perspective, he'd have 80% approval rating right now or something. You know what I mean? It would be huge. He wouldn't be coming in with all, I mean, half of his indictments are related to January 6th of that stuff.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? If he had just turned the other cheek strategically, even didn't have to even mean it. I mean, he should mean it, in that sense. But like,
Yeah.
even from a cynical perspective, he could have like had like a fraction of the indictments dealing with right now, and a fraction of the bad vibe. And you can say, well, he would never do it or whatever. But I mean, I don't believe in that kind of fatalism. I think people are flexible, and I think people can do things. You know,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
they can change on a dime.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, we've been going for a while. You want to plug what you got to plug?
Well, I mean, I don't really like plugging. You just look my name up if you're interested in following my show. Neighborschoice.com is our website, neighborschoice.com. And I'm excited to see what we're all going to do in this year. It's going to be it's going to be a wild year, but it doesn't have to be a negative year. That's our choice. I want to see a lot of great stories from podcasts and stuff like what you're doing. I want to hear back from your audience what positive improvements that they're making in their life. Baby steps. You're not going to, some people aren't going to be able to, it doesn't matter. That's what I'm saying. Like, God does not judge us based on how big your audience is or your pocketbook or all that kind of stuff, man. So it doesn't matter if, like you said, I can't build anti-gravity. You know what you do what you do great. And if you don't want to do anything different, that's fine. But just really have the flexibility of thought to consider what what you could do better in your life and how you can help someone. Maybe you can find somebody online who's building anti-gravity or cures for cancer and chip in $5. Just you have to have discernment. But I believe that the Holy Spirit is a powerful discerning force in the world, right? And if you ask for his discernment, he'll give you discernment so you don't get caught up in the latest scam or, you know.
I heard somebody say the other day that they they don't know what their calling is in life, but they know they want to make the world a better place. So
Yeah.
randomly during the day, they'll lay their eyes on somebody like, at a store or something like that, and they'll just say a quick prayer for that person. And
Yeah.
they're like, I believe that that goes out into the universe, up to God, and that changes the dynamic of the world. And if everybody were just to start doing that once a day, just
Yeah.
once a day, it would change so much, even if it's just your attitude. But your attitude would then spread to those around you.
That's right. And
So
that's why when Jesus' ascension takes place, it doesn't literally say that he floats up in the air. It just says that his disciples were had their eyes up in the sky, right?
right.
So he could have just like disappeared right in front of them. You know what I mean? Like he could have just like gone into a different dimension or reality right in front of their eyes, and then they're looking up in the sky like, did he just fly up or what? And the angel says, "Why are you guys looking in the sky? Get to work." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is that same concept of like, stop looking up as if he's just another pagan deity for you to say your prayers to because he likes to hear his name chanted, and then he might be nice to you. But look straight in front of you and get to work. You have things to do, and that is an indication for the way we should stop looking up in the sky, because Christ is among us, Christ is with us, and Christ is indwelling in reality. So when you say that prayer for that person, um, it doesn't have to float up to God because God has come to us. So
Mm.
he's right there with us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When two or three are gathered, he is there. So he's there with you in that cafe.
Yeah. For sure. Well, all right, man. I really appreciate you coming on. This was a great first episode of the year. So I can't wait to
Thank
get
you.
this out, man.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you. And thanks for inviting me.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, I'm going to stop the recording.